Hello? Hello? Uh, uh, uh,
Sure, Shug. What's up? Sure, of course. I've worked with a good few at this point, hon. Any particular model you have in mind? Harry. That's Harry, all right. Because, Sugar, that was his alive name. All phonies have alive names. You think I was born a Scotty? My name was Rebecca. I was a hairstylist before I was a phone gal. We all had other lives before this. the length and quality of which varied. Oh boy, he could barely remember it, hun. He's told me a good bit from after he became a phone guy. His responsibilities, having to write company logs after his whole boss died. Hell, he was even put in charge of tracking down a rogue phone guy who was out searching for his lost kid and ended up calling off the search out of pity alone. Harry's a sweet soul. But, well, he's a Generation 1 model. Meaning, he's a relic from the 1970s. Generation 1 models never remember much from before the phonification process. But Harry has demons. And those inner demons pursue him even now. Some things you just can't leave behind. Harry was a young man when he had his accident. I always found that particularly tragic. He fought in Vietnam, you know. I can only imagine how many death-defying situations he came out of in those jungles, only to die in a bear suit. It's so ridiculous that I feel angry just thinking about it. I sure hope he doesn't feel the same way. It's honestly pretty hard to think about. He was still barely old enough to fend for himself, even after he got home from the war. Got a part-time job at the local Freddy's joint, ended up excelling at his career. He survived a war and lived a soldier's life. Order and routine came naturally to him. But then, well, I needn't gossip. Well, you know, usually in a lot of cases, phone guys tend to remember their past lives and try to find their old families. But in this case, the opposite happened. When Harry went missing, well, his family came looking for him. They knew where he worked, after all. Even with his ridiculous phone head, his mom recognized him instantly. Mother's intuition, I guess. Ran over to him. Harry, we've been worried sick about you. Take that dumb phone hat off and come home. He had no idea who they were. His mother looked into his eyes, or lack thereof, I suppose, and said his name over and over. He didn't recognize them. He couldn't recognize them. Harry's manager came in at that point. An older model, a guy named Abel. One of the original 5 managers. A real bastard of a boss. He was the second model of phone guy, and it shows. God, he was barely a human at all. When he died in a shooting, Harry took over writing company logs for Fassbender Entertainment. Which is why he ended up at the factory with me, since it's basically Fassbender HQ. Sorry, off topic. Anyway, he kicked them off premises and had them removed by police for harassing his staff. Harry just stood there while his own mother was dragged off premises, calling out to him by name. Harry never really opened up much while I knew him, as close as we were. He broke down only once, and when he did, he told me that. I don't think he even really believes that he is Harry. But, well, I think it's a fantasy of his. The idea that someone cared enough to come look for him. It's no problem. Do be kind to Harry, won't you? I wouldn't bring any of this up with him, but, well, just show him that you care, I guess. He needs to know that people, you know, care about him, and Sorry, I gotta go. Take care, sir.
Hello? Hello? Uh, 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 Hello? Hello? Whatever. So, so, you know, uh, 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 whatever.
There we go. I left my post as soon as I finished writing this. I left my location and never looked back. I spent a while traveling through Boise, Idaho, just looking around. Those people I passed looked at me funny. Figured I was someone in a ridiculous costume or some sort of escape prop from a local circus, perhaps. Funnily, the kids never looked at me like that. Maybe some of them recognized me from Freddy's. Knew I was all right. You know, a person, like they were. I kept searching, and after no luck, I left town and started walking. I kept walking for a long time. I walked the entire length of southern Idaho and kept walking. Montana, Utah, Colorado. I just kept walking. Little things came back to me once I was out of that checkerboard prison. You know, familiar roads, familiar smells. I still have no clue where my old house was, but I remembered that I was married, and that my wife had died long ago. I even remembered my name, my full name, Jake Wilson. My son must have been Jason Wilson. I had a full name to work with. I had enough to find my son. I got a phone book and searched for every Jason Wilson in the country. Turns out there's quite a few of them. So I started walking. Started in my home state of Nebraska. Figured I had to start somewhere, right? Perhaps he was living near our old home. I traveled door to door looking for him and was met with varied reactions. I searched for months before I found the right house. It was located in northern Nebraska, a quaint suburb. I arrived in the evening. I walked up the smooth driveway, trudging through the snow. It was winter at that point, and I saw a light coming from the front window, so I peered inside, and I saw him. Jason. I saw Jason. But, I mean, it was clearly him, but he was grown up, like me. At that point, it occurred to me, how long had I been at Freddy's? How many years has that damned company stolen from me? Was I a fool to expect to see my son as I remembered him? I looked at the whole house, up and down. My son, he turned out all right. Hell, better than all right. He turned out just fine, even without me. And that's when she ran in. A small girl, into his embrace. And a woman entered the room behind her, wearing an apron. I noticed a whole dining room behind him, filled with people. I should have noticed from the big Christmas tree in the living room. They were celebrating Christmas in there. I stood transfixed, watching this happy family at the table, chatting, pulling Christmas crackers. They were happy. Slowly, the window I was peering through steamed up, and I couldn't see Jason or his family anymore. Just my own reflection. And I saw myself and what he would have seen me as. A monster. I couldn't bring myself to knock on the door. I left the house alone and never came back. He was happy without me, and having a monster suddenly stumble into his life would have ruined everything. Sir, do you think I'm a bad father?
Hello? Yeah. I'm, okay. No. You know, you know, so, you know, um, I'm, so, no. You know, you know, so, you know, yeah, I'm, so, okay, no, you know, you know, so, so, uh, uh, you know, um, yeah, I'm, so, no, So, yeah. So, okay. No. You know, uh, you know, so, uh, uh, you know, um, I'm, so, okay. No. You know, you know, so, uh, uh, uh,
This was my voice. My real voice. They ended up giving us the old stuttery voice boxes because, you know, a lot of the employees got their vocal cords shredded up in spring lock failures. I'm glad Roger gets to meet you too, sir. Me, I mean. I wasn't an astroscientist or anything all that interesting. Nobody working at Freddy's was, really. Maybe it'll be easier to understand if I give you a little history lesson. First phone guy produced was a guy named Scott Coffin. As in, that was the name he was born with. The first and only true Scott Coffin. The founder of our little company. The company was heartbroken when he died on the job. An accident while performing in a Freddy suit is what got him. This was before spring-lock suits were adapted from our competitors over at Fredbear's. He hit his head on a table and bled out. When he passed, it felt like a piece of Freddy's had died. The remaining 5 managers would have given anything to have him back. And they did. Some nutjob named Dr. Miller wrote a thesis on metal having a life force. The joy of creation. That same guy also patented the spring lock, interestingly enough. Anyway, at that point, the company had just bought an old workshop by the name of Afton Robotics, and, well, you know. I guess they figured if the machine could stitch fabric together, it could do the same with flesh, right? They got the remaining 5 Freddy's managers in to discuss and thus design the perfect manager. Strict but friendly, able to make and take calls from his own head. Endearing and just the right amount of lovable. The company wanted to create staff that were just as recognizable as the characters. Come down to any Freddy's location and meet Scott. He runs the place. They eventually finished the Scott Memorial Machine, which turned employees into living phone people. Here's a picture of Scott. Model 0101. He didn't last long. Technology was crude, and customers could tell he was suffering. The company put him out of his misery. We couldn't bear to see the man who gave Freddy's life in such pain. Think of him as Generation Zero, the black sheep of phone guys. They tried to reprogram the robotic AI of the first generation to be more like him. The dedicated employee he was when he was still alive, but of course that came with a million unforeseeable kinks. And no, I'm not talking about Fox kinks. Souls and memory can be tricky stuff. Overriding one mind with another, it's not pretty. Their image of the kind of person Scott Coughlin wasn't really a fleshed out person. It wasn't natural. Only the most dedicated phones survived this process and became functioning phone guys. I think the company got sick of the headaches that the Generation 1 phones gave us and decided to dull the AI next generation. Let the old brain work in tandem, you know? That led to workers remembering a little bit too much, though, and trying to reconnect with their own lives. So, for Generation 3, they just didn't reprogram us at all. They told us who we were now, and what would happen if we tried to run, trained us a little, and told us to get to work. So, that's how I remember everything. Sure, they may have put my skull and brain into a phone head, but, I mean, my mind's the same as it's ever been, you know, aside from a healthy helping of trauma. With all due respect, I worked at Freddy's, sir. I was 34. I was divorced, dropped out of college, lost my apartment, and my dog must be dead at this point. There isn't anything for me to go back to. I don't want to be Roger anymore. Roger's a drunken lout whose wife left him and couldn't finish med school. Scott Coughlin is a manager at the last remaining Freddy's location. The founder of the company, the man who started it all. Scott Coughlin is the very definition of what an ideal manager is. The definition of an ideal person. Scott Coughlin was a man who the company loved so much, they literally did the impossible to bring him back. Nobody ever loved Roger that much. Nobody even noticed when Roger went. The company loved Scott so much that they spent 20 years straight trying to bring him back. I'd much rather be Scott Coughlin than Roger, sir. This is home.
you know, you know.